Hello friends, fans, and dairy products of all ages, this is Cheese of Ages here. Today we're going to fix the aid action without removing everything that's good and fun about it, like a lot of people are doing. Some people like to overcomplicate adjustments to this thing to fix problems in it, and in the process not only shoot their players in the foot, but you do so using a Gatling gun, every barrel of which is a separate Gatling gun. Every barrel of those Gatling guns is a Gatling gun, until you have a number of barrels shooting your players in the foot equal to the number of grains of sand on every beach, on every planet, not only in this universe, but every possible universe that has ever existed, could ever exist, will ever exist, or etc., etc. Essentially, infinite foot shooting. Now, the rules for aid have you set up to aid as an action, and then later, as a reaction, you perform this thing. This has a lot of action costs. It can shut you out from your reaction, and effectively spends 2 actions to achieve a result that, in the beginning of the game, is actually mathematically weaker than any other way to give your allies a bonus, with the benefit of usually stacking with every other bonus that you can provide. Now, the DC for this is set at 20, but can be raised or lowered at GM's discretion. Theoretically, strictly rules as written, this would be done with the DC adjustments chart, but you can finagle with it however you want. I'd probably stick with the DC adjustments chart. And this immediately comes with a problem if it's set to 20, as in the early levels, it's really hard to succeed at a 20, and then later, as the party advances in levels, it becomes really easy to critically succeed at this. Now, Mark Seifter, the writer of most of the rules, has implied that originally the DC for aid was going to be a party-level DC. But in the end, it was decided that setting it to 20 carried far more benefits than having it be a party-level thing, so that was what they decided upon. Now, the most common change people make, completely and just no debate erroneously, is to set it based on the DC of what you're trying to help them with. And I'm not going to cut corners about this or be nice. This is incredibly stupid and misinformed. It seems logical on the surface, but if you apply the actual situations around it, you've basically just decided to throw your players into a black hole and then detonate it. When somebody's trying to aid someone else, it means that most of the time that's going to be something that's really difficult. And if it's just as difficult to help somebody do it as it is to do it, that means they're going to have a hard time helping each other. And that's kind of silly, especially considering it takes an action and a reaction to do this, and thus you have a very low chance of actually critically hitting it. So, at best, you're going to succeed and give them a +1. If it's something that you have a good chance of critically failing, you could hurt the party member because a crit fail on an aid gives them a -1. It is madness to scale the difficulty of aiding someone by the DC of the check you are trying to help them with. And logically speaking, it's easier to help someone do something because teamwork makes the dream work than it is to do it yourself by yourself. So it doesn't make sense for that to be the baseline. If you're adjusting it to the DC of something that you're trying to do, it should always be easy or very easy. Why did Mark Seifter suggest basing it on the average party level instead of the check they're trying to make? Well, then that means that aiding scales with how skilled the person you're helping is, which is intuitive as well. And also, a average party level DC is something that if you're a specialist in the thing you're aiding with, you still have a decent chance of critically succeeding on it, because that's how the DC for party level scales. Specialists can usually smash it pretty good. But not necessarily all of the time. So it's a good mathematical balance. It works very smoothly without having to do a lot of steps. It's just a set party level based DC that if you want to, you can adjust from there. That's the smoothest alternative. It also fixes the problem where an extreme case of something challenging, which is the case that you would most want to use aid, doesn't drastically lower your chances of doing so, and drastically increase your chances of failing. It just makes a lot of logical sense in how things flow, while at the same time fixing a lot of mathematical issues. So if you're going to make it more difficult and scale across all levels evenly, do that. Do not aim a Gatling gun of infinite barrels at your party's foot and make it where teamwork, when they would most want to use it, has a greater chance of sabotaging them. At the extreme action cost of freaking an action and a reaction, don't make that sometimes a negative one, and almost always only a +1. Instead, at worst, make it something where if they aid with something they're specialized in, they have a good chance of giving a big bonus to their ally when they need it. But it's not necessarily guaranteed to be huge. Now, what are these benefits of it being at 20? Well, as it gets a higher level, it becomes basically guaranteed that you're going to succeed on the 20, regardless of what you're using on it. So that opens up a lot more creativity and enables you to aid in more situations. If your specialized skill that you would use for aiding, if it was average party level, isn't applicable in the situation, then you wouldn't be able to aid. But if it's something that it's a DC that you could aid with pretty much anything that makes sense for the situation, then you could still aid in those situations even if the bonus might not be as large, or maybe even have a great chance of being a more than a +1. You could aid with anything in any situation as long as you can have training in it. That's nice and intuitive and smooth. That's fantastic. It's one of my favorite parts of the game because it encourages creativity and using your environment to your advantage and role-playing. It's great. The problem is if it's set at 20, it becomes really difficult at lower levels. Now, an often cited thing is in the beginner's box, it describes the aid check for helping somebody. In the very tutorial in the beginner's box for aiding, they describe it as being the same DC as the check being made. Well, instead of making it that, you might also note that the DC they give is average party level. So, there's that too. It also hits near what you could achieve via the DC modifiers table, making it easier. So there's also that. Now, if you want to just simply fix the low-level problem with aid without changing anything that's really nice about it being DC 20, you could just have the rule be it's DC 20 unless the thing you are trying to aid them with is lower, in which case use that. Bam. Everything wrong with aid solved, and everything great about aid still functions. There you go. Short video, and I hope I've covered the topic extensively. Aid is quite possibly one of the best and best designed things of the game, aside from the low-level issue, which they address in the beginner's box to a degree. So, how you should run aid isn't to freaking adjust it based on the DC of what you're doing it at. You should either do what Mark Seifter says and make it average party level and adjust accordingly, or just make it where it's 20 always, or if the thing you're trying to aid them on is lower than that, use that. You should not throw your party into a black hole and shoot a infinite-barreled minigun that shoots black holes into the black hole, and then collapse the weight of all known realities that could ever or have ever existed into their rectums by making it DC what they're trying to do. That will just, they will never do that action, because the majority of the time it will either not work or hurt people. There's no reason to spend an action and a reaction at that. In order to do that, you would have to completely redesign aid. Do not mistakenly think it makes sense and then just reach your hand into your player's stomach, remove their entrails one at a time until you reach their brain through their stomach. Don't freaking do that. Do not sabotage your players with a short-sighted rules mistake. So anyway, I'm still fending off people that think recalling information from your mind somehow gives you the ability to read people's minds and scry their location. I have to fix the barricade on the door, so I gotta roll.